The Grand Eco Hotel lobby fell silent. Kong Min-jae Adekunal paused at the entrance, his dark tailored suit cutting against the golden light. His eyes, sharp predatory, swept across the marble expanse. Then he saw her, Amina Baligan, 60 years old, silver-streaked hair, surrounded by 3 children who clutched a wrapper and called her grandma. Moments ago, she had announced to a room full of wealthy donors that she was pregnant. The crowd had gasped. Cameras had flashed. But Min-jae didn't gasp. He stood perfectly still, the Korean African tattoo on his knuckles catching the light as his hand slowly curled into a fist. Because he knew she wasn't announcing a miracle. She was baiting a trap. And somehow, impossibly, she was using herself as a lure. Asterisk, the truth you're about to hear will change everything you think you know about love, sacrifice, and the lies we tell to protect those we love most. Please like, share, and subscribe. Asterisk. The charity gala had been proceeding exactly as planned. Crystal chandeliers scattered fractured light across the Grand Eco Hotel's ballroom. Lagos's wealthiest citizens mingled beneath their glow. Oil magnates, tech entrepreneurs, politicians with practiced smiles, and their impeccably dressed wives who knew exactly how much their silence cost. The event was a fundraiser for maternal health clinics across West Africa, organized by the prestigious Adeyemi Foundation. $5,000 per plate, 200 guests, enough champagne to fill a swimming pool. Kong Min-jae had not planned to attend. He had arrived in Lagos that morning for a different purpose entirely, a corporate acquisition that required his personal attention, the kind of deal that involved encrypted documents, offshore accounts, and conversations that happened in rooms without windows. But his assistant, a meticulous Korean woman named Soo-yeon who had worked for his family for 15 years, had received a last-minute invitation. The Adeyemi Foundation, it seemed, was desperate to secure his attendance. They had heard rumors that the Adekunal Foundation was looking to expand its philanthropic portfolio in Africa. Min-jae had declined 3 times. Then Soo-yeon had shown him the guest list. And there, near the bottom, listed as a community honoree, receiving an award for her work with orphan children, was a name he had not seen in 12 years. Amina Baligan. He had told himself he came to observe, to gather information, to understand how a woman who had vanished with $3 billion won his family's money, approximately $2.5 million, had resurfaced at a charity gala in Lagos, accepting awards for her humanitarian work. He had told himself that his interest was purely professional. He had lied. The ballroom was warm, but Min-jae felt cold as he moved through the crowd. His presence caused ripples of attention, whispered names, curious glances, the particular stillness that descended when power entered a room. He ignored all of it. His eyes searched the crowd with the precision of a hunter tracking wounded prey, scanning faces, dismissing them, moving on. The tattoo that wound around his right wrist, an intricate design combining the Korean phoenix with the Nigerian Sibiti symbols for strength and destiny, seemed to pulse beneath his sleeve. He had gotten a tattoo at 19, the year his father died, and his uncle tried to steal his inheritance. The year he learned that blood meant nothing, and loyalty was a currency that could be counterfeited. The year Amina Baligan had held him while he wept, then stolen everything and disappeared. He was still searching when the speeches began. Mrs. Adeyemi, a formidable woman in her 60s with gray locks and a voice that could command armies, took the microphone with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. "Tonight," she announced, "we honor a woman who has given her life to children who have no one else. A woman who runs a small bakery in Yaba and uses every spare kobo to feed, clothe, and shelter forgotten children of Lagos. A woman who proves that you don't need wealth to change the world. You only need love." The applause was polite, charitable. "Please welcome Amina Baligan." Min-jae stopped breathing. She emerged from the side of the stage, and for a moment, time collapsed. She was older. Of course she was older. 12 years had passed. The hair he remembered as black was now streaked with silver, pulled back in an elegant twist. Her face bore the marks of time, lines around her eyes and mouth that spoke of laughter and grief in equal measure. But her eyes were exactly the same. Deep brown, warm as earth after rain, holding that particular combination of kindness and steel that made her the most trusted servant in the Adekunle household, the most trusted betrayer. She wore a simple Aso-oak ensemble, indigo and gold, modest compared to designer gowns surrounding her, but she carried herself like a queen. Her posture was straight, her chin raised, her steps measured and graceful. Min Jae's hand tightened at his side, the tattoo stretching across his knuckles as his fingers curled. She reached the microphone, smiled at the crowd, opened her mouth to speak, and then she saw him. Their eyes met across 300 feet of marble and privilege and lies. For exactly 2 seconds, her composure cracked. He saw it, the flash of fear, followed by something else. Something that looked almost like relief. Then she gathered herself, lifted her chin higher, and did the last thing he expected. She smiled directly at him and spoke into the microphone. "Thank you for this honor," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "I am humbled by your recognition, but I must confess, I have not been entirely honest with you." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "You see," Amina continued, her eyes never leaving Min Jae's face, "I have kept a secret that I can no longer hide." The murmur grew louder. "I am 60 years old. I have never married. I have no living family of my own blood." She paused. "And I am pregnant." The ballroom erupted. Gasps, shocked laughter, confused whispers, cameras flashing as journalists scrambled to capture the moment. Mrs. Adeyemi's face cycling through confusion, concern, and something that looked like carefully controlled fury. But Min Jae didn't move. He stood perfectly still in the center of the chaos, watching the woman who had raised and betrayed him and apparently lost her mind, watching her smile serenely at the uproar she had caused. No, not serenely. Deliberately. He saw it now. The way her eyes kept scanning the crowd, not in panic but in calculation. The way her hand pressed against her flat stomach, a gesture that was performed theatrical. The way she stood just slightly angled toward the doors, as if preparing for what came next. This wasn't madness. This was strategy. "Mama Amina?" A child's voice cut through the chaos. Then another. Then a third. 3 children burst from somewhere behind the stage. 2 girls and a boy. Their ages staggered between 5 and 7. Their faces bright with a particular determination of children on a mission. They ran to Amina and surrounded her, clutching her wrapper, pressing against her legs. "Grandma! Grandma, are you okay?" "Don't worry, Grandma, we're here. We'll protect you." Amina's strategic composure flickered. For just a moment, real emotion crossed her face. Love, fierce and desperate, as she looked down at the children who weren't her blood, but clearly owned her heart. Then she lifted her eyes to Min Jae again. And this time, the message was unmistakable. "Come and find out." The crowd was still buzzing, photographers still pushing forward. When Min Jae began to move, he didn't rush. Rushing would draw attention. Instead, he moved with the controlled patience of a predator who knows his prey isn't going anywhere, cutting through the crowd with precision that parted bodies like water. People noticed. Of course they noticed. Kong Min Jae Adekunle moving with purpose toward the woman who had just announced an impossible pregnancy. This was the kind of moment that launched 1,000 tabloid articles. He didn't care. Let them watch. Let them write. Let them speculate about what the Ice King of Seoul Lagos wanted with a 60-year-old former housekeeper and her unlikely children. By the time the truth emerged, it would be too late for speculation to matter. He reached the stage just as hotel security began trying to gently extract Amina from the situation. She was handling them beautifully, answering questions with vague pleasantries, allowing herself to be guided but not pushed, always keeping the children close, always keeping her eyes on the exits. "Mrs. Balogun." His voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. Security personnel stepped back instinctively, responding to authority they couldn't quite name but absolutely recognized. Amina turned to face him. Up close, he could see the details that distance had hidden. The slight tremor in her hands. The way her jaw was set against fear. The new lines around her eyes that told of sleepless nights and heavy burdens. But her voice was steady when she spoke. "Chairman Adekunle, it has been a long time." Chairman, not Min Jae. Not my child. Not the name she had called him for the 14 years she had raised him. from age 6 to 20, serving as housekeeper and unofficial mother in a household where his actual mother was too busy being a society princess to notice if her son ate or slept or wept. Just Chairman Adekunle, as if she hadn't taught him to tie his shoes, as if she hadn't held him through nightmares, as if she hadn't been the only person who cried at his college graduation. Not tears of pride for the Adekunle name, but tears of joy for the boy she had helped become a man, as if she hadn't left without a word and taken 3 billion won with her. Indeed it has, he said, his voice betraying nothing. You've been difficult to locate. I wasn't hiding. No. He let the word hang in the air, sharp as a broken promise. Then perhaps you were simply too busy, building a bakery, collecting orphans. His eyes dropped to her stomach, then back to her face, arranging miracles. The smallest smile touched her lips. You always were too clever for your own good, and you always were too good at keeping secrets. One of the children, the oldest girl, perhaps 7, with intelligent eyes and protective posture, tugged at Amina's wrapper. Grandma, who is this man? He looks angry. Min Jae looked down at the girl. She met his gaze without flinching, which was unusual. Children generally sensed danger in him, the barely controlled violence that lived beneath his tailored surface. But this girl stared at him with frank assessment, as if she was judging him. This, Amina said softly, is an old friend. He doesn't look friendly, the boy said. 5 years old, maybe 6, protective in the way of children who had learned early that the world was not always kind. Appearances, Min Jae said, addressing the boy directly, can be deceiving. Like Grandma's pregnancy, the youngest girl asked, perhaps 5, with the devastating honesty of the very young. The tension in the air crystallized. Amina's hand tightened on the child's shoulder, not in anger, in fear. Min Jae saw it clearly. She hadn't told them the plan. They knew she wasn't really pregnant, but they didn't understand why she had claimed to be. They didn't know what danger they were all in. He made a decision. Mrs. Balogun, he said, his voice shifting to something warmer, still controlled, but deliberately softened for children's benefit. You look tired. Please allow me to offer you and your family transportation home. My car is outside. That won't be necessary. I insist. He met her eyes, letting her see the steel beneath the courtesy. After all, we have so much to catch up on. The oldest girl tugged Amina's wrapper again. Grandma, we should go with him. Amina looked down, surprised. Folake, he smells like money. Folake said practically in the way of children raised in poverty. And he's looking at you like Daddy used to look at Mama, like he'd burn down the world to keep you safe. Min Jae went still. Amina went very, very pale. Interesting observation. Min Jae said quietly, his eyes never leaving Amina's face. Tell me, Folake, who is your father? The silence that followed was heavy with secrets. Folake opened her mouth to answer, but Amina cut her off with a gentle hand over her lips. We'll discuss this later. She looked at Min Jae, and he saw the desperation she had been hiding. Fine, we'll accept your ride, but the children come with me. I would expect nothing less. He offered his arm. After a long moment, she took it, and as they walked out of the ballroom together, the billionaire and the woman who had stolen from him, surrounded by 3 mysterious children, Min Jae felt something he hadn't experienced in 12 years. Uncertainty. He had come to Lagos for answers, to close an old wound, to finally understand why the woman who had loved him like a mother had betrayed him like an enemy. But something was wrong. The children, the impossible pregnancy announcement, the way she had smiled at him like she was waiting for him, the fear that lived in her eyes when she looked at the crowd, as if expecting a different kind of predator. He had assumed, for 12 years, that he knew the story. Now he was beginning to suspect that he didn't know anything at all. The car was a black Rolls-Royce Phantom, immaculate and imposing, waiting exactly where Min Jae had instructed. His driver, a Korean man named Junho, who had worked for family since Min Jae was a teenager, stood at attention beside the open door. He didn't blink at the sight of his employer, escorting an elderly Nigerian woman and 3 children into the vehicle. Junho had learned long ago that the Adekunle family's business was not his to question. The children, however, had not learned this lesson. "This car is bigger than our whole bedroom," the boy, Deo, Minjae had gathered, announced as he climbed inside. His eyes were enormous, taking the leather seats, the ambient lighting, the small refrigerator stocked with water and juice. "Deo, don't touch anything," Amina said wearily. "I'm not touching. I'm looking." "Looking isn't touching." "Looking to become touching very quickly," Minjae said, sliding into the seat across from them. "Trust me, I was a child once." The youngest girl, Kayamika, called Chi, peered at him suspiciously. "You don't look like you were ever a child." "Chi," Amina said, scandalized. "It's a fair assessment," Minjae said. He leaned forward slightly, and Chi flinched back before remembering that she was supposed to be brave. "I had been told I was born middle-aged. All business and no play." "That's sad," she said. "Yes," Minjae agreed. "It is." His eyes lifted to Amina, who was watching this exchange, an expression he couldn't quite read. Fear, yes, but also something else. Something that looked almost like grief? "Where am I taking you?" he asked. "Yaba, my bakery is there." "You live above a bakery?" "Behind it, actually, there's a small compound. Enough space for me and the children." Minjae absorbed this information. Yaba was a middle-class neighborhood, neither wealthy nor impoverished, a far cry from the Adekunle mansion in Victoria Island, where Amina had once overseen a staff of 12 and managed a household budget that could have funded a small country. "And the 3 billion won?" he asked softly. "Where did that go?" The children didn't react. The number meant nothing to them. But Amina flinched as if he'd struck her, not in front of the children. "They seem remarkably well-informed about your circumstances. I would think." "Not," she repeated, her voice suddenly hard. In front of children, they stared at each other across the expanse of luxury leather, and for a moment, Minjae saw the woman she had been before, not a servant, but a force. The woman who had faced down his father during his legendary rages. The woman who had threatened the senator's wife for insulting Minjae at a garden party. The woman who had told him, at age 20, that he was destined for greatness, but only if he learned that power without compassion was just another form of weakness. "Very well," he said finally. "We'll discuss it later. We'll discuss it when I decide we'll discuss it." Something stirred in Minjae's chest. Not anger, though he had every right to anger. Something else. Something dangerously close to respect. "Fascinating," he murmured. "You developed a spine in the last 12 years. I always had a spine. I simply chose not to display it in your household. And yet you displayed plenty when you emptied the emergency accounts and vanished." Her jaw tightened. "Is that what they told you? Being the investigators I hired when you disappeared without a trace? The ones who follow the digital trail to offshore accounts in Singapore and the Caymans? Yes, that's what they told me. And you believe them. The evidence was compelling. Evidence can be manufactured." The words hung in the air between them. Minjae felt something shift in his understanding. A puzzle piece sliding into a new position, suggesting a picture different from the one he had assembled. "Are you telling me," he said slowly, "that you did not steal 3 billion won from my family's emergency fund?" Amina was quiet for a long moment. The children had fallen silent, watching the adults with a particular stillness of young people who had learned to read danger in grown-up conversations. "I'm telling you," she said finally, "that the truth is more complicated than the story you were given." "Then simplify for me." "I can't. Not yet. Not until I know who's listening." "No one is." "Someone is always listening. Minjae." She used his name for the first time, and it hit him like a physical blow. "That's what you never understood. That's what got us all into this mess in the first place." Before he could respond, Folek spoke up. "Grandma, it's okay. We trust him." Amina looked at the girl, startled. "Folek, I've been watching him." Folek continued with the matter-of-fact seriousness of a child who had grown up too fast. "The whole time, he's angry, but he's angry because he's hurt, not because he's bad. Bad people don't hurt. They just want to hurt others. Min Jae stared at the 7-year-old philosopher who was dissecting his emotional state with alarming accuracy. That's remarkably astute, he managed. I read a lot, Folek said simply. Books teach you things. People like books. You just have to learn how to read them. And what? Min Jae asked, genuinely curious. Does my book say? Folek tilted her head, considering. It says you're the kind of person who would burn down your own house to catch a thief. But you'd also rebuild it afterward, better than before, and you'd make sure everyone inside was safe first. She paused. You're complicated. Most people would just say difficult. Most people don't read very carefully. Despite everything. Despite the anger and confusion, and the 12 years of betrayal burning in his chest. Min Jae felt his lips twitch toward a smile. I like this one, he told Amina. She likes you too, Amina said quietly, which terrifies me. Why? Amina looked at him with those deep brown eyes, full of secrets and sorrow, and something that might have been love, once, in a different life. Because the last time someone important in my life liked you, she said, it destroyed everything. The car pulled to a stop. They had arrived at Yaba. Mama Amina's golden touch was painted in cheerful yellow letters across a modest storefront, flanked by a tailor shop and a mobile phone repair stand. The neighborhood was alive with the particular energy of Lagos at night. Generators humming, music drifting from somewhere down the street, the smell of suya grilling at a nearby stand. It was a world away from the luxury they had just left. And yet, when Amina stepped out of the Rolls-Royce and looked at her bakery, her whole body seemed to relax. This was home. This was real. This was hers. Stay in the car, she told Min Jae. This isn't your world. And yet here I am. He was already stepping out, ignoring Junho's worried glance. Show me. Min Jae, you spent 14 years in my world. You raised me, fed me, held me when I wept. The least I can do is see how you've been living while I search for you. Something complicated crossed her face. Search for me? Did you think I would just let you go? I thought. She stopped, swallowed. I thought you would be glad to be rid of me. The words hit him like a physical blow. Why? He asked carefully. Would I be glad to be rid of the only person who ever genuinely loved me? Amina's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back furiously, turning away to usher the children inside. Come on, babies. Let's get you to bed. It's late. I want to stay with the money man. Deo protested. The money man has a name, Amina said firmly. Mr. Moneyman? Despite himself, Min Jae laughed. It was a rusty sound, unused but genuine. She's got you there, he told Amina. I've been called worse. You've been called worse because you deserve worse, Amina muttered. But there was no real heat in it. Just exhaustion. Just the bone-deep tiredness of a woman who had been carrying too much for too long. The bakery was closed for the night, but Amina produced a key and led them to the front room. Display cases empty, clean for the morning, the smell of flour and sugar lingering in the air, to a door at the back. The door opened onto a small courtyard. Typical of Lagos compounds, a central space surrounded by rooms, with laundry lines strung across and plants climbing the walls. It was modest, worn, but meticulously clean. Someone had hung wind chimes near the door. They sang softly in the evening breeze. Children. Amina's voice was gentle but firm. Bed. Now. But Grandma. Folek, take your brother and sister to wash up. I will come tuck you in shortly. Folek studied Min Jae one more time, as if memorizing him. Then she nodded solemnly and herded the younger two toward one of the rooms, their protests fading into the night. And then it was just the two of them, Min Jae and Amina, billionaire and bakery owner, accuser and accused. Sit, Amina said, gesturing toward a pair of plastic chairs beside a small table. I'll make tea. I don't want tea. You'll get tea anyway. Some things haven't changed. She disappeared into what must have been the kitchen, and Min Jae was left standing in the courtyard of a woman who had been his mother in every way that mattered, trying to reconcile the evidence of her guilt with the reality of her life. If she had stolen 3 billion won, where was it? Not in this compound. Clearly, Not in the modest bakery with its hand-painted sign. Not in the second-hand clothes the children wore, or the plastic chairs arranged carefully in the courtyard. Either she had hidden the money spectacularly well, in which case, why was she living like this? Or he had been wrong for 12 years. She returned with 2 cups of tea, steaming and fragrant. Hibiscus, he realized. Zobo. She had always made Zobo when he was upset as a child, claiming it calmed the blood and cleared the mind. Sit, she repeated, and this time he obeyed. They sat across from each other, the plastic chairs creaking slightly, the night sounds of Legos filling the silence. He could feel his driver watching from the car, could sense Junho's unease at his employer being in such unfamiliar territory. The children, Min-jae said finally. Who are they? Orphans. I took them in 3 years ago. From where? Amina's hands tightened around her cup. From a bad place. Be specific. I can't. Not yet. You keep saying that. He leaned forward, and even in a plastic chair in a Legos compound, he radiated a control menace that made grown men flinch in boardrooms. You said the truth was complicated. You said someone was always listening. You claimed pregnancy at a charity gala, when you are clearly not pregnant. And now you're asking me to trust you without explanation. He paused. Give me something. Amina, give me one reason to believe that I haven't spent 12 years grieving a woman who was nothing but a lie. She flinched at that. Grieving. The word hung between them. You grieve me? Of course I grieved you. His voice cracked just slightly, and he hated himself for it. You were. He stopped, gathered himself. You were everything. Don't you understand that? Every other relationship in my life was transactional. My parents saw me as an heir. My relatives saw me as competition. The servants saw me as a meal ticket. But you, he shook his head, you used to sing to me when I had nightmares. You used to save extra portions of dinner because you noticed I was still hungry after meals. You used to look at me like I was worth something, not because of my name or my inheritance, but because of me. His voice dropped to nearly a whisper. And then you left, without a word. And I had to believe that everything, everything asterisk, had been an act. Amina was crying now, silent tears tracking down her lined face, catching the light from the single bulb overhead. It wasn't an act, she whispered. It was never an act. You were my son, Min-jae. In every way that mattered, you were my son. And everything I did, everything asterisk, I did to protect you. Protect me from what? From the people who wanted you dead. The words landed like a bomb in the quiet courtyard. Min-jae went very still. Explain, he said. Amina set down her tea with shaking hands. She looked toward the room where the children slept, then back at Min-jae, as if calculating risks and alternatives. The money, she said finally, the 3 billion won. I didn't steal it. Someone else did, and they framed me. They wanted me out of the house, away from you, before they made their move. Who? Your uncle, Park Sang-joon. Min-jae felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. Park Sang-joon, his mother's younger brother, the man who had smiled at Min-jae's father's funeral and moved into the family home a week later. The man who had contested Min-jae's inheritance in court for 3 years before finally being paid off and banished from the family. The man who had been found dead in Singapore 6 years ago, under circumstances that were officially ruled an accident, but were universally understood to be anything but. My uncle died years ago, Min-jae said. His plans didn't. What plans? Amina took a deep breath. Your uncle didn't just want your inheritance. He wanted your company.